Hello everyone, so today we're making some gluten-free bread, gluten-free, dairy-free bread, a bread that actually stays fluffy and soft past the few hours that you bake it, so this will stay soft and fluffy for a couple of days. So we're starting off with some almond milk, and I'm just warming that up in a bowl, and then I'll add my yeast to that. I use milk instead of water, almond milk. You could probably try with water. I haven't tried it, so I wouldn't like to say whether it works. And I'm going to add 30 grams of sugar to that as well, just to help the yeast rise. So in my bowl there I had 100 grams of milk, almond milk, 30 grams of sugar, and to that I'm going to add 12 grams of yeast. And this is active dried yeast. So I have spent a very, very long time creating this recipe. So this is an overnight recipe. If you don't overnight it, I feel like it doesn't have the same fluffiness. So that's why I always make it overnight. So I make it the day before, I let it rise an hour, leave it in the fridge for overnight, rest of the day overnight, and then in the morning I usually bake it, and then I let it cool throughout the day, and then I'll cut it when I want to eat it, usually for dinner or like as a side to soup or something. So I'm going to cover that yeast, put it in a warm spot, let it rise. Next, we need to make up our kind of psyllium husk mixture. I use blonde psyllium husk, which I get on Amazon. If you know any stores in England that sell it, please let me know. But I buy this on Amazon, and I use the blonde stuff because the normal stuff dyes my bread purple. Originally I was bleaching it with lemon juice, but even that didn't fully work, and it kind of still had a tinge. So this is a whole psyllium husk blonde. So for that I use, let me just double check, I use 16 grams of that blonde psyllium husk. To it I add 130 grams of almond milk, and then I just add in the rest of my liquid ingredients to this as well, so they're all in one bowl. So I'll also add in 55 grams of oil, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and 1 egg white. Egg white for structural purposes, the apple cider vinegar because it helps the yeast, it gives it a better environment to rise when we put all our ingredients together. Oil, because oil, I don't know why oil. I have a lot of research behind every single decision that goes into making this bread, because it took a very long time to make this recipe and find a good gluten-free bread. And I was mostly inspired by the Warburton's gluten-free tiger loaf. I read the back of their ingredients to basically all their bread a lot of times and kind of experimented with a lot of the ingredients that they use. So it was a long time in the making, probably over a year. So everything that goes into this has a purpose, and so they're not a super easy ingredients to get your hands on at times. So already I have in the bowl here tapioca starch, which was 110 grams. To it I'm adding 90 grams of potato starch and 80 grams of corn starch, or corn flour as they call it here, but it's not flour, it's the starch. We're only using starches because that allows for a better rise, like the Warburton's bread. They only seem to use starches, so that was my inspiration to make that decision and try it, and it worked a lot better. You can use some bread flour. If you used all bread flour, I don't think this recipe would work at all. But you could probably switch out the 80 grams of cornstarch for bread flour if you wanted but it would really be only good for fresh eating, I imagine. I tried other recipes with bread flour in it, and I found that it really didn't stay soft until the next day at all, even though the recipes would sometimes state they did. I'm also going to add into this 2 teaspoons of xanthan gum and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. The baking powder to help with the rise, the xanthan gum to hold the shape better. You can minus the xanthan gum, it will be more crumbly. That's a choice that you can make. But I add it in, and I obviously use the gluten-free. Gluten-free for everything. Make sure you check your ingredients. Looking back to the apple cider vinegar, you don't have to use apple cider vinegar. You could use a different type of vinegar. But making sure obviously it's celiac friendly. You need to check that. I just use apple cider because it's what I have on hand. And the one that I have is celiac friendly and vegan friendly. This would be vegan if you minus the egg white. I believe. I can't see why not. Looking at the ingredients now, yeah. So here's my yeast. It's very active, as you can see, very bubbly. Is exactly what we want from our yeast. So I'm adding it back into the dry ingredients, and then I'll give that a mix through. And next I want to start experimenting with flavoured bread. I really want to try cinnamon swirl and blueberry. I make cinnamon rolls, but the idea of cinnamon swirl bread sounds really good to me. Blueberry bread I've seen done a few times, sounds really good to me. I can't eat cheese, but if I could, jalapeno and cheese sounds really good to me. But maybe like a tomato, basil-y kind of summer one. I really want to experiment with flavoured bread, but I'm currently starting on kind of sourdough, so kind of busy with that and learning how to do that gluten-free. But I don't know, maybe I'll come back to normal bread. I feel like I spent forever achieving a really good recipe, and then once I did it, I've just kind of moved on and left the normal bread behind. This is like rustic style bread, but there's still so much to learn to gluten-free bread, making it like the hardest thing to do gluten-free wise. So I'm adding back in the wet ingredients now that we did before. Now I'm going to mix it, and as I'm mixing it, I'm going to add in some salt to add the flavour that you want in bread, otherwise it'll be really bland. So I've got that mixing, then I'll add in the salt you could add in. At this point is when I would probably add in different flavours if you wanted to add them in. So herbs, if you wanted to add in some herbs, like maybe some Italian seasoning, then I would probably add it now, and some of the other bits. So here I decided to add an extra 20 grams of milk. So overall I used, at this point, 230, and I added another 20 grams. So we're about 250 grams at this point of milk. Just because it was a little bit dry. I feel like when it comes to things like this, you really have to judge it off of, kind of eye as well. So it was too dry. I had to add in some more milk. So I did add it up. I think I wrote it down. I got to 245 grams milk overall. So it's just mixing through. You can see it kind of combining together. You don't have to worry about over mixing too much with gluten-free bread because there's no gluten to overmix. So it's not going to get too strong or anything like that. So at this point, it looks good. It's how I want it to be. You can see the pieces of the psyllium husk because it's whole. You could always blend down the psyllium husk into powder if you wanted. I'll link the psyllium husk I use. So into my Banneton, I'm going to add some baking paper. and this is bread flour at this point, I'm adding in some bread flour, and I'm going to kind of put that at the sides. The reason I do this is so that once I've finished the rise on my bread, I can put it straight into my oven. So I literally just grab the paper out and put it into my Dutch oven. I probably added a bit too much flour here into the Banneton, but that's okay. You don't have to do that though. You could obviously just put it in the Banneton normally and then move it out, but I just find that it works better. You lose less kind of structure of the bread by doing it this way. So once you kind of got your flour evenly coated over your baking paper, you can get your bread into the bowl. I wet my hands first to do it just because otherwise the dough is quite sticky and it'll get stuck all over my hands. Oil is probably the easiest way to do this. This time I just used water on my hands, but oil is the best way, I would say. Oil your hands, then get the dough out of it, roll it up, and then pop it into the thing. And then you can put some flour over the top. And I like to school my bread now, just to help as it rises. It kind of gives it an escape route to the gas. You don't have to do it that way, but that's what I would recommend. And then I'm just covering it with some kitchen towel just because I think my dish towels were all in the washing machine, so I didn't have to. So I just cover it with some baking paper instead. Going to let that rise for an hour and a half. Depends how warm your house is. This is what it looks like after an hour and a half of rising. You can see it's much larger. It's about doubled in size. So I pop it into the fridge, and then this is it coming out of the fridge the next day. There you can see. Still about the same size. So I leave that to warm up. I leave it for 2 hours. I don't think it was very warm, so I left it for 2 hours. And then this is it before I put it in the oven. So I put that covered in the oven for, I'm just scoring it again here, although I do a different line and then we end up with 2 score lines, but that's okay. So I'm going to put it covered in the oven for 55 minutes. This is partway through, and then this is it done. I put it in for an extra 15 minutes covered. Uncovered. So I do 55 minutes covered, 15 uncovered. And this is it. Once it's done, you can see it's got a nice crispy outside. It's hollow when I tap it on the bottom. It's nice and golden. Here it is again, looking good. And then I'm going to cut into it. So as you could hear, the crust is nice and crunchy, but the inside is lovely, fluffy, squishy, tasty, not gummy, perfect. So here I just switch around because it's easier for me to cut it that way. And then in a minute I'll show you the crumb, but the crumb turns out perfect. I always find that it turns out perfect using this method and this recipe. So I'll just show you that now. Here you can see lots of bubbles, super squishy. It's very malleable. You can really kind of push it around. It's not going to break on you. It's not going to crumble on you. So it turns out wonderful and bread-like and tasty, super tasty. So I had this with my dinner that evening. So I just cut that up and have some slices. So I have a chunky tomato soup, and I just breaded the toast the bread, as you can see here, buttered the bread with some dairy-free butter, and I just dipped it into my chunky tomato soup, and it tasted delicious. Homemade bread, homemade soup is perfect together. And this is it the next morning, so I haven't even cut off the end here. This is just from what I had, and you can see it's still fluffy, it's still good. And then I do cut off the end, which is a little bit stale, but I cling filmed it so it's not super stale. you can see that the bread is still super malleable, still, even though minus my terrible cutting bread skills, super bendy. You can still it's still like bread. And like most of the other recipes that I've tried, well, pretty much all of them, they're just not bread like the next day. But with this one, you can see it still is, and you can see how fluffy it still is, and it doesn't break on you. So really do try this recipe if you've had problems with gluten-free bread before. I've been there. You can see the cling film there. I cling filmed this last bit up, and then I end up having that for my lunch with some meatballs. My dinner with some meatballs. But I hope you enjoyed this recipe, and I really hope you give it a try. I've put a lot of work into it, so tell me how it goes, and I'll see you next time. Bye!